Planning a fishing trip shouldn't feel like a full-time job. With fishingbooker.com, you can find and book the perfect fishing trip within minutes. Fishingbooker.com connects you with trusted fishing captains around the world. Booking is fast, easy, and secure, with access to verified customer reviews, loyalty rewards, and around-the-clock customer support. Everything you need to book with confidence is in one place. So head to fishingbooker.com and start planning your next fishing adventure today.
Scree gear is more than apparel. It's a tribute to the relentless, the tireless, the true guardians of the wilderness. It's for those who seek not just a game, but a legacy. Not just a sport, but a way of life. In our gear, you're more than a hunter. You're a story, a tradition, a legend in the making. Scree is your journey, your triumph, your success. Join the working man revolution. Success awaits.
All right, welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass Podcast with Kevin and Chuck. Today, we're going to talk about permaculture. Permaculture is kind of a loose definition. Only came to be in the 70s. As people put it together. And basically what it is the integration of land, resources, people, and the environment through mutually beneficial synergy, ideally with no waste in a closed loop. So it's basically utilizing all your resources to kind of work together and kind of, that whole mutually beneficial. And it really is ideal for preppers. I mean, it's all about simplifying life. It makes the homestead work smoothly. It straightens out your budget because you end up, trimming things down. You cut down the work. It just kind of brings everything together. So think of it like this. Let me give you some broad strokes, kind of paint a picture for your mind. Imagine you have a field, you keep your bees in it and they hang out, you let it grow, you get big tall grass, you let the sheep and the goats, they go out, they eat all that tall grass, they eat everything, they bring it down to a tolerable kind of level. Then you send your chickens in there, your chickens go in, eat all the little bugs and the little things that are there, and they eat it down a little bit more. Then you let the rabbits go in and the rabbits go down and eat it kind of even more down to the ground. And everybody during this whole process is taking a crap and doing their thing and adding kind of fertilizer and all that to this whole environment. And it basically, one, it's saving you work on clearing and weeding and all this kind of stuff, while at the same time resupplying all the nutrients and breaking it down to make everything better. Plus, you're not paying for rabbit feed. You're not paying for chicken feed or hay for the animals. And it's just this whole mutual beneficial process that kind of takes care of itself. And then this land is ready to go in a year for, you to put the big garden over there, and you just keep cycling through your property, letting some sections grow back. I mean, you know how fast the grass grows, right? It's not a limited supply, you know? So tell us, what's your take on permaculture, Kevin?
I think it's pretty interesting. The idea is that it's a long-term project. You know what I mean? It's something that you build up over time, and then, after a certain period of time, all you're doing is harvesting rather than gardening. I do a lot of gardening, where I plant annual plants, but permaculture, that's not really what you're going with. You're not going with something that's going to have to be replanted next year. You're going with stuff that's going to resupply itself, apple trees, nut trees, things like that work in a natural environment and naturally focus on the ecosystem, how it's supposed to function. Right.
Well, it goes back a lot to that Rick Austin's with his like secret garden of survival.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's permaculture,
Right.
It's that whole continuity and mutual beneficial and not being out, replanting and all the time. I mean, this is just a great application of life. It's more a process,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like aquaponics, right?
Right.
Aquaponics where you have, the fish and they put all that nitrogen in the water, but then they're growing plants on top of the water or cycling that water into a plant bed
Mm-hmm.
where they're taking the nitrogen out to feed the plants. And it just kind of all works together. This ends up, one, just being a natural way, I guess you could say, the way that God intended it to work, right? Nature is supposed to like take care of itself.
Right.
They all do it without hard work. You don't see, squirrels out freaking, sowing the, they do sow the nuts, but they sow the seeds for new trees by going and burying them everywhere, thinking they're storing them.
Right.
And it naturally, keeps that thing going.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of that idea. It just keeps going. You want to find ways to work everything together to make your life easier and to get a bigger and better harvest. And you'll find that you end up fighting insects and predators as you bring these things together. Things just kind of work naturally because you got to imagine through evolution, like all over time, these things have found a way to work with each other, but they've kind of ruled out the bad things, like it wouldn't have survived if bugs were coming in and destroying when you did it this way. Right.
Right.
So when we follow nature's path, it ends up already being planned out to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If that makes any sense.
Right. And I think, a lot of farming in the United States today is monoculture, mono agriculture, where you have one crop, you know what I mean? But if you get, one type of fungus or a specific type of insect, you could ruin the whole crop. The idea with permaculture is that, using like multiple different sources, if you have one failure, then, you have everything else to balance it out. So there's 12 steps, or 12 principles of permaculture. So let's go through the 12 steps. The first one is observe and interact. The idea is when you find your piece of property that you're going to be working with or you're going to be homesteading on, you want to spend some time, walking the property and figuring out, the terrain, what kind of trees and what kind of soil you have. What type of, water access do you have? You're going to want to spend some time before you start, getting a pickaxe and a shovel and start, tearing things up. You want to see what you already have to work with and kind of focus on those areas and just spend some time getting to know the land that you're on. The second principle is catch and store energy. Now that doesn't just mean like electricity, that means, like having a forest to supply fuel for your stove, for your wood stove, right? Storing water that's on your property, like rain barrels or, setting up swales to divert water in a, specific place where you can catch it and store it. That type of thing. So, a lot of that stuff is just basic land management that can be done pretty simply. And once you have it set up, it should last, it should be a permanent system that, that functions in a continuous way. Number 3 is obtain a yield. Now, the most important thing about this is actually producing something that you can eat, right? So focus on projects that provide a return. Whether it's planting trees, whether it's like setting up those swales to set up a pond or an irrigation system, the idea is that you're turning the land into something that's actually producing for you instead of you having to plant and harvest every year.
Right. I mean, that's definitely seems to be the goal, though, is to have the land keep giving back. I mean, that's the beauty of it. I mean, that's, people have, a couple of apple trees. If you have some established apple trees, that, I mean, you're usually getting more apples than you could ever eat in a year all day, with
Right.
2 apple trees, and that's an amazing thing. Or the same thing, nut trees. You get 2 or 3 pecan trees, you're already doing way more than you could take for your family. I have a neighbor has blueberry bushes, and I've always tried to do blueberry bushes, and I'll have like 3 in a corner of the yard or 4,
Mhm.
and I'll get them to like 3 feet tall or 4 feet tall. And I thought I was cool because I can get like 2 cups of blueberries a year between the
Right.
birds and whatever. And I'm like, oh, it's good. And then I moved where I am now in the South, and so many people have like established blueberry fields kind of thing. And I'm talking in a small area, but because they've been there and they've been forever, and that continuity, like Kevin's talking about, they're like, oh, I have too many blueberries. Can you come get some? Could you bring like 4 or 5 gallon buckets or so to fill up? And we're walking out with 5-gallon buckets, and they're like, all right, we didn't even put a dent in it. Can you come back next week? And you're like, wait, my freezer's kind of full to the top with blueberries.
Right.
But my point is, as you get these things really established and set up right, then they're just going to keep yielding and yielding over and over. And that's really the goal and where we're looking at, where you can really, produce, but it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's something that you're going to kind of create with time and a little commitment. And honestly, like Kevin said, a little planning, a little forethought of where you put this stuff and how you get it started.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important thing, is that the idea with permaculture is that you're spending more time harvesting and less time working on a garden, less time like weeding and looking, bringing in fertilizer and pesticides and stuff like that. You're working more with the natural system. Now, when it comes to like straight gardening and permaculture forestry, you're going to get a higher crop yield on gardens per acre, but you're going to be working a lot more too, So step number 4 is apply self-regulation and accept feedback. Now what this means is basically ensuring a functional system. You know what I mean? You want to have other people look at look at what's going on there and, get advice from people. You know what I mean? This isn't something that you can, master all by yourself in a couple of months. It's something that you really want to read up on and study up on. And also, you don't want to spend so much time and money on this that you're killing yourself in your bank account. It's something that you want to build over time, not all in the first year.
Well, with inflation, you may just want to bankroll it all right now. I'm just saying.
It might be a wise investment, honestly.
Dude,
the way things are going, it's like
I did pay $9.98 for a 2x4 the other day, and I was like,
yeah.
Damn it.
Yeah, it'd be nice if you could harvest some of the lumber from your own property, but unless you have a good mill going, man, it's real hard to do.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure. I keep looking at the I think it's like Woodland Mills or something. There's some like $3,000 Harbor Freight style sawmill, and I'm like, do I just need that? Because I feel like that'll pay for itself in a couple 2x4s,
Yeah, no,
and I
seriously.
have like several pine forests on my property. I mean, they're like an acre each. I have like probably 4 acres of dense, pine trees that are all 100 feet tall. And I'm just like,
they'd be great for
do
that.
some damage with that,
Yep. Yep. All right. Principle 5, use and value renewable. So basically what that means is make the most of nature's yield. What you want to do is not necessarily you want to plant plants that are going to produce every year without having to replant them. This is basically it's an anti-tomato podcast, permaculture podcast, because it's like you want to plant stuff that you plant it once and then you don't have to keep planting it every year. Asparagus,
set it and forget
blueberry bushes, set it and forget it. There you go. Perfect. Principle number 6 is produce no waste. Now, basically that means that you're going to try and reuse everything, whether it's going into the compost bin or it's reusing, gray water, shower water or your dishwasher or something like that, washing machine, using that water to water your crops, or, put it in a certain place that's going to be beneficial versus just a septic tank or a leach field. Like repurpose broken tools. I know I've done that with certain things. When I've got, something broken, I'll reuse it as a, trellis, or get a new handle for an axe versus getting rid of the whole thing and buying a brand new one. I think a lot of us do things like that, where we just, repair equipment rather than toss it and go buy a new one.
Yeah.
Design from patterns and details. Use natural patterns and then add details after. So, basically, we talk about maybe a grove of fruit trees, and then, a patch of asparagus. But you have to have kind of natural details in between. The borderlands are where you produce the most, the most diverse stuff. And those
Right.
border areas really will kind of feed everything around it. You know what I mean? You want to be conscientious of what plants return nitrogen to the soil, what plants rob nitrogen from the soil, and you want to have a good balance with that sort of stuff. I know when we talk about, planting things, a lot of the Native Americans had systems of doing that. What was the three sisters? What, corn, beans, and squash?
Corn, beans. Yeah, that sounds right. And that's, I mean, I know that Secret Garden of Survival was a lot of that, of planting an apple tree in the middle, and then they had like beans or something, growing up it, and they had garlic around it to keep the deer away, and then they had some other flowers that would keep the insects away from it, and different things. You find the things that work together.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you really, because they're going to take care of each other, that was the biggest thing for me, was planting garlic around the apple trees. I mean, that was huge for keeping the deer away. And,
mm-hmm.
It made such a difference. And you're like, hey, now I'm getting two great things that are growing out of it. And that
Mm-hmm.
was, the Indians were using the stalk of the corn to grow, beans up it. And that's, and I think you want to plant a dead fish in there too, whatever.
That's right. The fish heads. All right. Number 8, integrate rather than segregate. When you're designing your property, use a system that allows a relationship between different things that allow them to work together. And that's kind of what we were talking about there with planting your plants around each other to be, to help each other out, versus planting this chunk of stuff here and this chunk of stuff here, that sort of thing. Number 9, use small and slow solutions. Basically, working on a project slowly and over time, you're going to be able to design stuff that's going to be more sustainable. You're going to have a better idea how things are going to work together, and you're going to have a better idea taking your time. You're going to have a better crop and diversity of harvest, basically. You know what I mean? Some plants that, like apple trees, it might be 6 years before you even get an apple out of it. You know what I mean? Some of those longer, slower growing trees and nut trees specifically can take a while before you're actually harvesting, but you have to plan ahead for that sort of stuff. Number 10, use and value diversity. Basically, if something fails, you have a backup system. You have a backup for it. You know what I mean? If you have some blight on your apple trees, you still have other crops and other things producing for you that you're not just fucked.
Right.
Chickens, goats, and pigs, fruit trees, nut trees, hardwood trees for fuel, fishing and hunting. Basically, you have, a lot of options to work with when you're working with the land instead of against it. Number 11, use edges and value the marginal. Borders between where things are the most valuable and diverse productive elements of your property. Now, we talked about that a few minutes ago, but it bears repeating that the small little sections between areas are really useful. The little border next to your walkway, edges along your driveway or a road front even, those can be.
I know poison ivy thrives there.
Right. It does. It's a good spot for growing poison ivy. But, even using things like poison ivy and pricker bushes around the outside of your property might prevent people from
keep little kids away.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's right. Or at least keep little kids itching so much they can't trash your stuff.
Yeah.
Number 12, the last one, is creatively use and respond to change. So, when you have a bad situation occur, something goes wrong or something like that, the idea is to exploit it instead of trying to fight against it. If your pond is leaking and causing a marshy area, find some wetland plants to use instead of
right.
Doing all sorts of work to try and divert water and fix things. Use that area to grow things that are useful. You can even build little peninsulas or islands in there to grow fruit trees, but or trees that use a lot of water. That will suck up some of that stuff. Watermelons, a lot of different types of produce use a lot of water, and things like that you can use to your advantage instead of just trying to fight against nature. So those are basically the 12 principles. And I think when it comes down to homesteading and creating a long-term property, I think that gardening is great. You can produce a lot, but it takes a lot of work. And if you're planning on living in the same, land and the same piece of property for a long time, it's worth the time and effort to plant some slower growing plants. Plan your property out a little bit more to be helpful. So you don't have to use electricity as much. You don't have to use pumps as much. You can, things are naturally irrigate itself.
That really is the goal. I mean, the idea is, if you can cut down on the time you're spending weeding, I know, that's a game changer for, my wife with her gardens and stuff is, now we use ground cover and different things,
right?
Things that probably are not ideal in the whole natural kind of scheme of things, but using techniques like this and utilizing stuff that is going to take care of itself, using, your animals to, go in and you're saving on feed. That kind of stuff is huge. And like you said, just the electricity you're using to pump water around or to run the tractor or to do different things, it's a big deal, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It can be a game changer.
Yeah, and it can be an annual expense when you do like like gardening like I do. You know what I mean? I usually harvest and save my seeds, and I compost and I use some of that, but I still have to bring in fertilizer and dirt here and there.
Sure.
And it's one of those things that with permaculture, you're not going to be having those annual expenses. You're going to go from planting every year to just harvesting every year. And that makes a big difference, especially as we get, older. My back hurts when I spend too long weeding. I'm an old man now. My body doesn't work like it used to work.
Yeah, it's sad when those days come, right?
Yeah, yep. I just
Now,
noticed that I'm starting to have a gut at the end of every winter instead of keeping my six pack year round. It's going to take me all the spring to get rid of this belly.
Catch up to me.
Sooner or later.
Catch up to me. It's not good. Oh yeah, it'll take a little time. You got a few years. That's but the big thing is these are principles that you can even kind of just use in life that just makes sense though with the whole permaculture thing. So my wife goes to these farmers markets and goes and she's got a bit of a flower farm here and we grow all this other stuff, but it's what else can you do to utilize these same. So she's already doing the effort of going and sitting at a farmer's market every day. Are there other things? It turns out my woods are full of just grapes that grow naturally. Can we harvest the grapes and put it in and take that with it? What I'm saying is it's that whole everything working together. I'm doing all these projects and whatever. Hey, if she's already there and at a market, if she could sell and do some different things with the other stuff that we have available to us, you can make it so much more.
Mm-hmm.
I was always trying to weigh out the benefit of getting a FFL and doing the gun store thing. And I'm like, well, one, I look at Gun Broker and I'm like, gee, I know I can get guns cheaper than, what I'm seeing things sell for there. So that's one benefit. But then, all right, well, I buy a lot of guns. So that $30 transfer fee that I could be saving every time I buy a gun, that's another benefit. If I'm a gun manufacturer, I can make full auto weapons. That's another benefit. But the thing is, you find ways that you get multiple things coming out of the same expense. The more things you can get giving back to you, then the better it's going to be, and that's how you kind of justify things, It's like, well, I have a truck because I like a truck and it's tough and cool. All right, well, I can go mudding with it and I can do all the redneck things that I like to do. But then, all right, I can pull a trailer so I can go make money with it. All right, I can, use it to go get lumber and whatever. And the thing is, the more ways you can apply it, and, in my case, I'm always looking for the more ways I can make money with it, the more I can justify it. But
Right.
It doesn't matter. It's how many problems can you solve with each thing that you do. And by planning things that are going to just kind of give back and work together, it's so much more. And that's kind of that whole permaculture mindset, though, is making things work together. We work so hard fighting things and trying to change it instead of saying, all right, this is the world. How can I fit myself into it? And I think that's the approach we need. And I definitely, as like a homesteader or trying to live off grid, it's so much easier to accept and embrace it as opposed to try and fight the land and work against it. And I think that's the goal that, we all kind of need to be working towards. And like I said, it really applies in life and all around is, instead of change it, how can I kind of get into it and steer it in a direction that's going to benefit, me and get us the outcomes that we want.
Right.
And, and maybe that's, maybe my outcome is benefit my community or whatever goal it is you're looking for. That's the thing. You want to kind of let's steer the ship instead of build a new ship every time, I guess is where I'm trying to go.
Right. Right. And, I think there's something to be said for, diversifying your portfolio, you know what I mean? As far as, the things you're producing, I know I know personally, there's a lot of vegetables that I really like that are, that are great. They grow fast, lettuces, spinaches, and things like that. But there's also a lot of vegetables that you can preserve for a long period of time, as far as, roasted peppers or, pickles or things like that you can get from your garden, making jams and jellies out of fruits that you can do to preserve the foods. And when you have multiple, sources coming in, then you cover a lot of your bases. You know what I mean? If you're collecting your own honey and your own jelly and, your own pickled vegetables and things like that, you can save a lot of money from the grocery store. When you're harvesting lettuces and things like that, that's great for, the month or two that you've got them coming in. But, if you can really preserve some of the foods and grow some of the foods that have a longer shelf life, you can really stretch it out for a long period during the winter and, during the winter and early spring. But
that's always the goal, though.
Right. Long term.
To have that year round, right, long term kind of supply.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we're all kind of working towards. And there's so many different things, like you said, fruit and nut trees, berry bushes, things like that can be such a huge additive, to your whole survival plan or food stores that it can be a game changer.
Right. Right. And I like the idea of how things work together the more I read about it. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have a bug problem. You have a lack of chickens problem, You don't have a slug problem. You have a lack of ducks problem. That's sort of idea where, things work together to benefit each other, Yeah. All right. You got anything else on permaculture?
That's what I got on permaculture.
All right. Sounds good.
That's what I can tell you.
If you guys want to send us an email at preppingbadass@gmail.com. We will read the email. If you've got ideas for show topics, if you've got questions, if you've got ideas, just shoot us an email and let us know. And what else can they do? Go to our Facebook page.
What they want to do is they want to go to preppingbadass.com and they want to buy some cool t-shirts that say, "Don't give them a fucking inch." Because that's really what it's all about. Don't give them a fucking inch. And I like permaculture. Maybe we can make that shirt, make that happen, right?
Yeah. There you go.
Work together, people. You do the work so I don't have to. That's what we need. I don't know. So anyway, preppingbadass.com. You also can support the Facebook, the podcast with going to patreon.com/preppingbadass. You also can join the conversation on Facebook by searching out the Prepping Badass group or the Prepping Badass Facebook page. You see a lot of cool information posted up there. With that, stay safe, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
The Survival and Basic Badass podcast is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.
Planning a fishing trip shouldn't feel like a full-time job. With FishingBooker.com, you can find and book the perfect fishing trip within minutes. FishingBooker.com connects you with trusted fishing captains around the world. Booking is fast, easy, and secure, with access to verified customer reviews, loyalty rewards, and around-the-clock customer support. Everything you need to book with confidence is in one place. So head to FishingBooker.com and start planning your next fishing adventure today.